Well, welcome everyone anyone that's listening to the Mindful Learning podcast. I'm delighted today to have Dr. Miranda Matthews, who is going to be the head of the MA of Arts and Learning. She has been for nearly a decade now, over a decade, a teacher educator in various places, most recently Goldsmiths. And we're going to talk today about how the arts can activate social change, which is a vital issue and one that's sort of much ignored in the media or demonized in the media, and a very topical issue. So I just want to hand over to Miranda. This is the key question we're exploring. Maybe you could give us a sense of your sort of background and how you come to have such an interest in the arts and the issue around how arts can sort of facilitate social change.
Well, thank you so much, Francis, for inviting me to discuss this really important topic. As you say, I've been involved in higher education for more than a decade now in teaching, but before that I was in schools and in sixth form colleges, and before that I was an artist and a practicing artist. And I can remember sitting in my studio doing my MA Fine Art thinking, I really want to give back to society. I feel like I've learnt so much, I've had so many wonderful opportunities, and that I wanted to be with people in the learning. And that was, I suppose, the decisive moment for me for when I wanted to go into teaching. And that kind of, I suppose, feeling, we've just had a show yesterday, show actually it's today, it's opening today, the MA Arts and Learning show called Withness. And that feeling of withness, of being with people, which I think is absolutely vital for education. And in terms of a sense of opening ways for discussion and participation, so encouraging different ways of seeing and being, and that goes right back to John Berger, and also Bell Hooks had her own stance on encouraging alternative viewpoints and diverse subjectivities for active interpretation. So
yeah,
I think
maybe
that,
I'm just thinking, there'll be some people, obviously very famous name, John Berger, but maybe we just sort of look at Berger and Hooks for a minute just to explain to people who they are. You maybe just talk a tiny bit about Berger and ways of seeing and why that's so sort of important, and then take us through to Hooks.
Yeah, so I mean, John Berger was like a post-Marxist theorist, writing in the 70s, 1970s, and had this wonderful book, Ways of Seeing, quite a slim book, but very, very socially transformative in the way that it reached many, many different audiences, to encourage people to look at how art can be viewed in different ways, and to encourage different viewpoints that bring in minoritized voices, the voices of women, the voices of minoritized groups, to interpret artworks in different ways. And this is a really key word, interpretation, which Ways of Seeing by John Berger actually made very, very popular and continues to be popular. So then also in terms of Bell Hooks was an absolutely amazing critical pedagogy theorist. She was initially inspired by Paulo Freire, the kind of initiator of critical pedagogy theory, which is really about withness, and it's about forming dialogues and being with oppressed groups, rather than coming in as an educator thinking, oh, I have this superior knowledge to impart to people, so that everybody's cultural starting points are valued as interesting and ways of connecting with the world, socially beneficial. And Bell Hooks really took this forward particularly for women of colour, for minoritized voices, and had a perspective on teaching to transgress, so teaching to actually change things, to not copy the masters or the canon, as it were, of received wisdom that's probably from kind of westernized perspective that was sort of foisted all over the world at various points in time in colonial practices. So yeah, I'm hoping that that comparison between Hooks and Berger is a bit more apparent now, and as to how there are connections there to different viewpoints, different interpretations, and the real significance of art for social change, therefore, in saying that it's not all factual, and we shouldn't really just always be leaning towards STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths as the most valuable subjects in the world, because the arts enable these really super valuable ways of interpreting different worldviews, different cultures, diverse cultures, and creating senses of understanding and tolerance that are and cultural communications that are absolutely vital.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one thing that would be interested for you to talk about is just an early project, or an earlier project we've talked about before. I remember it's one of the first papers you wrote that I read in the writing group we have at Goldsmiths, and that was where you sort of became a seal, didn't you? And maybe you could explain really the sort of transformative effect of doing this, and it could take us a bit more into this idea of sort of becoming and understanding different viewpoints and things like that. I know the sort of headlines sound relatively comic almost, but it's quite a striking sort of narrative and example of how something small like that can really have quite a big impact. Just any thoughts you have on that?
Sure. Well, that, Francis, really links to theory that we've connected with in terms of post-humanism and new materialism. The time I made that work, that was way back when I was doing my MA in 2001 to 2003, and I'd already made several bodies of work that were really looking at this interconnection between human beings and other beings, and I'd done that my BA programs as well. And then on my MA, I decided to connect with the myths and magic of the Silkies, or the Selkies, which are a Celtic group of people, and I have some Celtic ancestry. So I made this seal suit. Essentially, for a long time as a young woman, I suppose I was told I was too sensitive, that I needed, to thicken my skin in a way. And so I made this additional like neoprene skin, actually modelled on a dress that I'd had since I was 14. And of course, people have these different kind of experiences as teenagers. So I made this this neoprene outfit, totally covering myself like a seal suit, and I walked around Reading campus in it, and I had photographs of myself in this seal suit. And essentially the myth of the Selkies is that women escape domesticity, and they might get bored, hanging around, just being in domestic spaces, so that they could put on this skin of a seal and go and swim away into the ocean, into the unknown, and then just come back in the morning and take the seal skin off and be in their kind of habitual processes of being in, what's accepted to be women in society. So that was the kind of myth and the magic of it. And that work travelled a bit. It was in the Royal British Sculpture Society bursary prize in that year. And I also took it up to a seal sanctuary in Oban in Scotland, which is where, somewhere I'd first seen seals when I was 5, and put the seal suit in with the seals and saw how they reacted with it, and got some photographs of that. So, I mean, I think that artists, I really do appreciate you picking that example, because it's really great to be able to focus on a particular piece of work that has historical relevance for me. But in terms of how artists relate socially, that artists can make work about anything and everything. And it really is unlimited in terms of what artists choose to make work about, and therefore things that have social context that go way beyond the immediately apparent layer, the skin, as it's the skin of the work, to what is beneath, to different interpretations and ways of seeing, as I was saying earlier.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I mean, it links to something else I'd like to move on to, because you've done a lot of research, haven't you, around climate change and sort of thinking ecologically. Do you want to just take us through some of the sort of research projects, like the ecologies of practice work that you've done, and how that sort of has linked to the project of social change?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate to be head of Centre for Arts and Learning at Goldsmiths since 2019, and every year I kind of put my ear to the zeitgeist, as it were, to locate a theme. And in 2021-22, that was particularly around ecology. And so I had I curated a whole annual program of speakers, and the students that presented on the theme as well. We had a couple of symposiums, international theorists, all speaking on ecologies in practice. And then that led to a collaborative project between myself, a number of practice researchers, and Climate Museum UK. And we had some really interesting workshops at Goldsmiths, bringing in local secondary schools, and you were working on the drawing and writing with me, because we'd written together on that, and that seemed to be a really good thing to do to develop our collaboration there. And we also had Bridget Mackenzie and Kimberly Foster working with dialogical objects. We had Kevin Davidson and Tom Mansfield on sound and listening. So we had this really kind of innovative carousel of methods that schools and students age 14 to 15 really came to do, and their teachers. And then we wanted to take that further. So we had a practice research website from that. I edited a book following that, which is due to come out in August, on ecologies in practice, with 29 international contributors. And that's been obviously a labour of love, really, a labour of earth love for me for the last couple of years. And then since then also I've been working this year, 24-25, with Theatre X Bangladesh, who did contribute a chapter to that book that's forthcoming. And they create drama, participatory drama, around the issues of climate change in Bangladesh, which is the least developed country in the global south, that actually faces the brunt of the Western misuse of the earth resources, and the flight paths that deposit carbon everywhere on the earth and cause waste everywhere. The West's waste is shipped over to Asia and just left in huge piles, and also countries in Africa. So they're experiencing absolutely devastating consequences of these happenings. Lots of displaced children and women in particular, lots of street children who are all kind of having to kind of try and adapt to these sweltering situations, and rising sea levels that are destroying their livelihood. So that's what I've been working on this year, and seeing what we can do in terms of social change. Theatre X created 15 films that they've been taking around different organisations such as UNESCO and various arts groups in the UK. We had a Centre for Arts and Learning event where they presented as well. So yeah, I mean, that's what I've been doing in relation to ecologies. And also we have a really great collaboration coming up, which you're also involved in, with the British Ecological Society and the Department of Art at Goldsmiths, who and the British Ecological Society want to come in and do workshops with our PGCE students, also with the art department, and it's a really fabulous interdisciplinary collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, isn't it, that coming back to the kind of question, how can arts facilitate sort of social change, that education does have a vital role, doesn't it? But it's kind of, as you have been saying, an emancipatory sort of idea of education, whereby, students, learners are not being told a lot of stuff. They're actively learning and doing with the so-called teachers. So that's what happened, wasn't it, in the Ecologies in practice work that you did with the school children and with older people too. And yeah, I'm just sort of circling back to that question. Obviously, is it, what is really having an impact in terms of the arts in education, in your view? What if we could sort of go back over the things you've already done, what does generally have it? So we're thinking about the British Ecological Society, that you can, in a way, exact quite significant change by training or educating teachers, as we like to say, because then they will have a huge effect on the pupils or the learners they teach. So I'm just interested in kind of, it's an impact type question, how do you know you're having an impact, and what does, in your view, really have an impact in, with the arts and social change?
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting, because I've just been on an impact and reach training session at Goldsmiths as well, and that's those words, impact and reach.
Yeah.
So that the impact that you have is actually the way that research connects with non-academic audiences and participants and makes a difference in their lives. And so we try to do that in as many ways as we possibly can, because obviously we don't want our research to be entropic and kind of just within academic spheres, because then this then kind of perpetuates the view that there's ivory towers, dreaming spires, etc. of academia that then isn't relevant to the people in towns and rural spaces, etc. So yeah, I mean, firstly, things that we did, we tried to do to actually create resources. So we created schools resources for schools and tested them out and asked teachers if they were useful. And that was with the Ecologies in Practice project. That was initially something we did. Then we in terms of what you're saying around impact, one of the key things is to think, as you say, that even if you have a small group of people, and this is what came up in my recent training, that it's the kind of spheres that those people then work in. So like you say, teachers reach out to students, and one of the schools that was in our Ecologies in Practice participatory research then went away and created a mural, and the teacher then moved to another school and did the same climate related project, created another mural, and then that reaches across the whole experience of that school and those students. And they can also be, an influential group of people. So let's say Shudip Chakraborty, our partner in Bangladesh, took the films he created to UNESCO, and that's an influential group of people where things start to filter into different places. But impact can take years the reach of impact can take years to materialize. So for example, I wrote a book about arts methods for self-representation of undergraduate students, and like a couple of weeks ago I got an email from an academic at another university saying, thank you for writing that book, because I've developed this program on arts methods, and it's titled this, and I know this is directly related to your book, so thank you for writing it. And I kind of flagged that email because it's reach, isn't it? It's somebody saying this was useful for me, and this is what it's done for me. And I suppose that's still within an academic context, but the more that we can gather comments, statements about how what we've done in arts education or in education is making changes for people, that's I think impact and reach.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I guess the arts has, though, got sort of tangled up in a quite an instrumental sort of discourse, or you know, that the arts has to be for something, it has to do this and that, and I guess we are discussing that now, aren't we? But sometimes, you know, it is interesting, your work, because it is, as an artist and as a researcher, you are trying to make social change. You are trying to get people to rethink, you know, what it means to be, say, with your seal project, means to be an animal or to be a woman, and or, you know, with the ecologies in practice, you really are trying to educate people, sort of, I would call, say, mindfully, it's a mindful learning podcast about climate change in a way which is not sort of threatening, but is really artistic, and people feel a sense of agency about that they can do something. So, and I guess one of the issues can be that it gets sort of tangled up in a quite a quantitative measuring of impact, you know, that you've got to done X, Y, and Z, or you've got to have, you know, actually got this house built or that thing done. Whereas I think what's interesting is that there's more sort of qualitative evidence, isn't there, that can be offer kind of the richer, more complex view that social change, although it can be, you know, very direct, it also is, it happens in indirect ways. So I'm just interested in having a little bit of kind of discussion, because I think the arts has particularly suffered, hasn't it, because it isn't something that can be measured scientifically in numbers that easily. It can in certain ways, you can measure XYZ projects happen, blah blah, but so yeah, just any thoughts on that one, really?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not somebody that thinks that the arts need to be totally separated from numbers. I loved maths at school. I think it's brilliant. And but in terms of what you're saying, Francis, about the qualitative meaning of things, that even big numbers, they're all step by step. They're all made up of small things.
Yeah,
You know, a million is a million ones, that sort of thing. You know, that these
yeah,
things are
yeah.
step by step, and they actually kind of build up incrementally, and sometimes kind of creep up, or kind of sneak up in ways that are not immediately apparent, but through qualitative
Yeah.
kind of reflection, then you start to see, oh yes, that's different, that's changed from that point. So like next year, if we still having our centres in the same way, our theme for Centre for Arts and Learning is stories of change, and that's that whole thing around stories of change is another big impactful term. But you can see a story of change through one person's arts practice in terms of how they connect with audiences or dialogues or participatory groups, or create pedagogical tools for different groups of people. So that, in a sense, is where we need to, I think, and college does this, and you know, I'm in the college practice research group, and you are also, but that there are different ways of attributing value to the research that people do, that isn't just quantitative, that is experiential, and it is about that story of change for intentions, for explorations, for kind of trialing and pushing new ways of working with materials, and participatory dialogues. So I mean, one of the big things with the museums and galleries that we work with in MA Arts and Learning, for example, is that they stop using the word education, but they use the word participation, because they still want to differentiate themselves in some ways from formal education in their public pedagogies, and they use this word participation. For example, at the Whitechapel Gallery, they do this. Richard Martin, who's at the Whitechapel Gallery, uses that word now, but participation, because that is their measure of engagement. And of course, that can be numerical. You can say, oh, well, there were, you know, 100 participants in this and 50 participants in that. But it's the stories of change then again around what happened through the participatory experiences for those people from when they came into the event to when they came out of the event, or when they, sometime later in their reflections of visiting an exhibition or taking part in a learning activity. So yeah, I think there are lots of, going back to that ways of seeing, view, interpretations of a meaning and value. But the kind of, I suppose, the way of seeing it is that kind of we are always realistically faced with in higher education is monetary numbers, and how, this much money goes with this many numbers of people and not that many numbers of people, and this many participants and not that many. So yeah, in that case, then the stories of change, the values are really significant in how we put together the narratives. And you'll be familiar with this, Francis, through your creative writing expertise. It's the ways that we present the narratives for social change. Let's say, going back to that original question you asked me, that offer ways into people, potentially somebody listening to this podcast or another podcast that you do will think, okay, that rings a bell with me and that supports what I want to do. And it could just be a sentence I say or a sentence you say or somebody else says, and then that helps that person then go on to do their project.
No, really interesting. Just to sort of finish off, because we're about to go, you and I, to see the MA Arts and Learning final exhibition, aren't we? And maybe just any thoughts on that and the issue of sort of social change, because it is very much in students' minds, many of whom are teachers themselves. Just any sort of closing thoughts, just to celebrate that the work that you and Dr. Esther Sayers, who's currently the head of program, and you will be in September, won't you? Have done, and your team with Michaela Ross and Tara Page. You've worked really hard with these students to, often it's always an inspiring exhibition, but often the theme of social change is really actually at the heart of a lot of what the students are doing.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, the title of the show this year is Withness. And the students on our MA Arts and Learning really do have wonderful opportunities to grow and expand their arts practice, and to really invest in themselves, in the importance of them being creative and having opportunities to reevaluate, repair, restore connectivity with their practice in the social and learning contexts that they are connected with. So we do have teachers, we have primary educators, secondary educators. We also have people working in museums and gallery education, in community education practices. And they bring in the social values of their contexts into the kind of problem posing tasks they set themselves to explore and develop through practice throughout the year. And often they're working with participatory groups in their actual careers, that then they are able to bring these in-depth knowledges that they discuss in their peer groups on the MA Arts and Learning into their actual employed situations. We have alumni that go on to do amazing things, and it really, really does increase their confidence to actually go out into the world and do things like, we've got somebody who's just set up a gallery, Yaiza Hernandez in Bethnal Green set up a gallery. Dulcie Heppel and Miller Stoking Rover have an alumni group, alumni kind of working project, where they come in and do workshops that are around this kind of evaluative practice and do that in different educational settings, including for our PGCE students. There's lots of excellent things that our alumni go on to do from the MA Arts and Learning programme. So and that's with the input of people like Dr. Esther Sayers, who has a wonderful background in museums and gallery education, and also is a consultant nationally and internationally, and works particularly on what can be seen as an expanded view of arts practice. So not just drawing, painting, printmaking, sculpture, etc. But Esther does skating projects and the whole kind of social architecture, spatially organising participation around those. Has an aesthetic and creative value of its own. And yeah, Michaela Ross is a practicing artist, lots of connections with galleries and museums, and has written, co-wrote the Tate ways of looking, which connects with ways of seeing that it's like ways into the language that is used in galleries, which sometimes is different from other educational settings. So yeah, we have a great a great team of practitioners, education practitioners within the MA Arts and Learning, and some wonderful students.
Yeah, you do indeed, and I'm looking forward to going to the exhibition right now. And I'd just like to end by thank you so much, Miranda, for a really fascinating discussion around the issue of arts and social change. And if anyone is interested in applying to the MA Arts and Learning, do get in touch with Miranda. You can very easily contact her through the Goldsmiths website and get her email there. Just Google Miranda Matthews, MA Arts and Learning, and it will come up straight away. And also, if you're considering training to be a art teacher, the PGC Art and Design, which Miranda teaches on as well, is an excellent program. And possibly even you might be considering doing a BA in education. Miranda does a unit there on understanding learning. That's also worth looking at too. So thank you so much, and we'll end it there. So I will see you soon, Miranda.
See you soon, Francis. Thank you.
See you. Thank you. Bye.